Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. I don't think anyone could have predicted the political whirlwind that is the summer of 2024. A botched debate performance by President Biden, calls from his own party to step down, an assassination attempt on the life of Donald Trump. President Biden gets COVID and during his isolation makes a decision that stuns the world. He ends his bid for his second term in the White House and endorses Vice President Kamala Harris. Within 48 hours, she raises millions of dollars and thousands of volunteers and secures enough delegates to be the Democratic nominee. What's next? Well, we'll find out with political analyst Dr. Claville. Another View is next, right after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Last night, President Biden addressed the nation about his decision not to seek a second term in office, and that's just the latest in the continuing saga that is the race to the presidency. Here to make sense of it all is political analyst Dr. Claville with his award-winning Claville Report, and happy birthday, Eric!
Thank you so much, Barbara. So good to be here. And what I couldn't think of anything better to do on my birthday.
Oh, that is so sweet. That is so sweet. We really appreciate that. So before we get into our discussion, I want to play two clips from last night's address by the president. So let's listen to the first one.
So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. It's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
And one more that I'd like to play from the president.
In just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I'd like to thank our great Vice President Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country.
So what were your thoughts about his speech last night?
Well, first of all, I thought his speech was very gracious. I thought it really set the tone for what we're about to experience now, which is historic. Before I address that, I'd just like to say also that it was inevitable that he had to drop out. I thought that before the debate, he was the best option to win this election for the Democrats. However, again, because he just wasn't able to recover from that. It wasn't his policies. It wasn't anything with his administration, but it's just simply the perception of the lack of strength and the trepidation that he could last 4 years in that job.
Why do you think it took him a while? And do you think that the isolation with COVID would really just kind of solidify things or gave him time to think?
Oh, listen, absolutely. Anybody that's been sick,
yes,
you got a lot of time to think on your hands. And also when there's a power grab, those that are plotting for that power also have a chance to work overtime. And you're just isolated. I think that was just, that was just something that happened and it gave the opportunity for what had to happen. Anyway, however, the reason why I believe it took so long is because, listen, the president of the United States is the most powerful position in the world that we have currently in the history of our world. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but, you're in that place, you're in the Oval Office, everybody stops for you. I mean, it's just, it is power that only a few have had a chance to have.
Yeah, because we as regular Americans really don't understand that power in that dynamic in terms of what it really is like.
And listen, even every time I go to the Capitol, every time I go to various places and visit with representatives, so forth, so on. I mean, the power is intoxicating. Washington is a beautiful place. I love it, and anyone that's ever gone, you can feel it. So it's hard to give that power up, especially when you have favorable ratings like he has, and you say, wait a minute, why are you guys doing this? I would like to also say that from the Democratic side, I believe it was political malpractice for them to have that discussion, that argument in the public purview.
That was going to be my next question, because it just seemed like shouldn't the Democratic Party have said, let's go behind those closed doors
Absolutely.
that they talk about and work this out, but they were so public with it. Well, do you think it was because they got such pushback?
Well, no, I think in part, first of all, they knew who Joe Biden was 6 months or a year before the debate, okay? They saw his decline. They had meetings all the time together. I had an opportunity when he was in Virginia Beach. I had an opportunity to visit with him as well, shake his hand and so forth. And he was older. I felt that he was older at that particular time, and I said, wow, his handshake wasn't as firm. Mm-hmm. And I think at that time period, 2023, that conversation should have started at that time. However, of course, even in speeches, you didn't see him a lot giving a lot of speeches, right? He was giving cue cards, from those protecting him so he could stay on point. So they knew, but again, I just think it was just political malpractice. Now, keep in mind, within every party, every organization, every structure, you have power structure, you have different factions, right? Power struggles. So, with that, of course, I knew from the New York Times, they started first, the editorial board and everyone coming after him. But at the same time, I just thought that they could have handled it better. However, in politics, we have short memories, and how things change so quickly. And the scales of favor go back and forth. I mean, for those of us that remember, what happened with Dukakis and Reagan, the Willie Horton. Yeah. Dukakis was up.
That's right.
After Willie Horton,
all of a sudden he wasn't.
It shifted. right. So you get the shot fired, the miss, attempted assassination upon former President Trump. He's up. And then you get the bowing out of Biden and the interject now this historic candidate, and now the momentum has shifted. So we still got a little bit of 100 days, but we'll get more into that. But I'm just saying, it's just, this is, you mentioned it, the summer of 2024.
I'm telling you,
want to be remembered.
It is just amazing. And if you follow, politics, and you follow what's happening in current events, you can't help but be caught up in it, because every day there's a huge change.
Absolutely.
So where were you Sunday when you heard the news? And did you expect the president to endorse the vice president immediately as he did?
Well, from my friends, my colleagues that I speak with, I advised and I said, listen, this is the weekend that he's going to go ahead and bow out and endorse Harris. Harris is going to be the one to step up. Of course, I have my circles that I talk with, so everyone's like, yeah, that's the way it's going to go. Where was I Sunday at 1:00? I was in church, and let me tell you what happened. It was so funny. So I was in church, and the pastor got on this. I started talking about people on their cell phones in church. So what I did, I put my cell phone up because I didn't want to get that heat. I didn't want to get that smoke, So, but then I feel like my phone's like vibrating. It's like, why is my phone going off so much in church? So about 2:00, I get out and I go to the restroom, and I'm like, I have 17 missed messages. I have 5 missed phone calls. Wow. I have emails because, I'm fortunate enough to be able to not only appear on your show, you're the very first person that allowed me to, with this crazy idea to talk about law, policy, and politics in 2015. And I'm so grateful for you. But since that time period, I've been fortunate enough to be entrusted, with speaking to the Greater Hampton Roads community with our wonderful television stations here, WTKR, Wavy, WVEC. And, they were like, hey, we need you on air. This just broke. So immediately I left church after that and went and appeared on our various stations. So that's where I was. Not checking my phone, by the way.
So when you let's backtrack just a little bit. So as President Biden gets COVID, he's inside. The assassination attempt against Donald Trump happens. The head of Secret Service has resigned.
Absolutely.
She really took a shellacking, as they say, from Congress on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
On both sides of the aisle. Although it was interesting because I was watching Lawrence O'Donnell on his show, and he did kind of a back look at other attempts on presidents' lives and how the males who were in charge of Secret Service at the time, none of them were fired or resigned. I mean, they all were allowed to stay in their jobs, multiple years past that. So it just seems like there's that dichotomy in terms of how people are treated. But were you surprised at the attempt, and why does the Republican Party not talk about the fact that this gentleman was a registered Republican?
Yeah. So just real quick, back to the Secret Service head resigning. There was no issue she was going to survive that. But there's also, we live in a different time period. Relationships matter. And unless you have those relationships, you're not going to survive, no matter what happens. We also live in a time period where everybody's trying to score major points, and then immediately, because of social media and how we get information. So the attempt
really does change the dynamic completely compared to what happened in '68 and in other years. '82.
Right. With Hinckley. Right.
Right.
Where the real shot was fired. But to your point, the whole thing is one tweet can change the entire dynamics of any situation. So with that being said, that had to happen. She wasn't going to survive that. And then, you asked about why they're not talking about it. Well, first of all, I'm not surprised that there was some type of attempt. And the reason why I'm not surprised is because we've seen this before. We've seen Gabby Gifford actually get shot in the head and survive. Yes. That's Senator Mark Kelly out of Arizona's wife. She's a former Congresswoman, U.S. representative. We've seen it before. Steve Scalise shot while playing baseball. We've seen this before. Nancy Pelosi, husband, bludgeoned it. And he was coming for her. Went to her home. We've seen this before. Attempted kidnapping and possible assassination on Governor Whitmer out of Michigan. So I'm not surprised, because of the temperature. And of course, Mother Emanuel, the horrific massacre that happened in the church by Dylan Roof. Am I surprised? Answer is no. However, I believe that the reason they're not talking about it is because it was one of their own. And, of course, it's not going to score them any points if they talk about, we have someone that tried to kill us. So there has been also talk kind of a re-education campaign to say it was someone that, he wasn't really trying to assassinate the former president. He was trying to create a mass shooting. So you've seen that in backroom channels and things on the web start to materialize, which is the first of a lot of things that's going to start to materialize in social media.
Yes, unfortunately. Yes, that is very true. So when it happened, though, former President Trump said he had a wake-up call. And that he was going to be kinder, gentler, and focus more on the issues.
Just like George Wallace. He had a wake-up call. Hot lead causes you to have a wake-up call.
But then when he gets to the convention, it's back to the same old same.
Yeah, I thought he was a bit more subdued, though.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. The first, especially in the very beginning when he was telling the story. But then after that, he ran back up. But to your point, I believe that this is, now with this election, this is his final stand. He's fighting not to just become president again, but he's fighting for his life. Because if he doesn't win this election, he goes to jail. I mean, that's really the reality of the situation. He wins his election. He can appoint his own attorney general. He can also appoint that attorney general. Then they can also replace the federal prosecutors in those different areas. You can appoint more judges that will rule in his favor, just like the judge ruled in his favor with the dockets in Florida, which is going to go to 11th Circuit. They're going to deal with that. But then it goes to a 6-3 Supreme Court where Justice Thomas is writing, basically these these decisions and the dicta. Dicta is just additional commentary in legal decisions that don't so much. They're not the decision themselves. However, they set the tone for future decision. And so that's why the federal judge in Florida, utilized the dicta, the argument in which Justice Thomas wrote in his decision, in order to dismiss the case in Florida. So that's the importance of that, and the importance of how the court is stacked 6-3. So with that,
and Biden actually talked about in his speech last night,
absolutely
continuing to work on reform for the Supreme Court, probably for this very reason, in terms of how the power that they have to change the whole dynamics of our country.
Absolutely. Listen, elections matter. Elections have consequences. And one of the biggest prizes of elections is to being able to appoint judges that will sit on courts, that will create decisions that will dictate our lives, and decisions that are made for the next 40 plus years, which I always say 25 to 40 years. That's the 25 generation, 40 years, the end of a generation, the beginning of a new one. So when we talk about who's going to be the next president, there's a very high probability that person will appoint at least another one, possibly two more Supreme Court justices.
Unless they change the number of justices.
Yeah.
Do you think that would happen?
It has happened before. We've had as many as 15 justices on the Supreme Court, but this was back in the Marbury v. Madison days, and when the Supreme Court was like just in the basement, where nobody really paid attention to it until that decision. So we've had as many as that. But we've settled at 9. I think 9 is where it stays.
So former President Trump decided on J.D. Vance as his vice presidential pick. There's been some questioning among Republicans as to whether or not that was the best choice, especially now that there is a new candidate, candidate on the Democratic side. So what were your thoughts about choosing him, and will that make a difference in terms of who the presumptive nominee for the Democrats, Kamala Harris, chooses as her vice president?
I thought it was a very good pick before Biden dropped out. Here's the reason why. J.D. Vance is young. J.D. Vance is from Ohio. J.D. Vance speaks to middle white America, and also poor white America as well. Coming from Ohio, where he's from, where the opioid epidemic ran rampant. Even his mother got caught up in drug addiction. It was a great story during the convention about her. I thought it resonated powerfully throughout the entire middle America and white America as it relates to how he was able to come out of that military, and then from there going to law school and become a venture capitalist. I mean, it is the true American story, also with a non-white wife, a diverse wife, as we see today. So when you talk about J.D. Vance, it is a new American story, right? It worked when Biden was running, right? So the RNC convention it created this multi-level marketing kind of a camp meeting type atmosphere, where Trump was attempted assassination. They tried to kill our leader, the representative of our movement, and now he's alive. He survived it. God has his hand up on him. Franklin Graham was praying. I mean, it was just, you had Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania. It was excitement. It was there. And then all of a sudden, pop, Biden leaves the race, and then Harris is interjected, and now the excitement comes on the Democratic side. It shifts. J.D. Vance now becomes a liability as far as various issues go, especially reproductive health issues and the like. So with that, yes, he becomes a liability. However, I believe it's all about messaging. How do you create this message? I said I believe it was on Waving when I was able to get some analysis there, that this election is really going to boil down to several issues. The several issues, I believe, is reproductive health for women, immigration, and protectionism as it relates to the United States, both domestic and also internationally. And of course, it's always the economy, right? So at this point, when we take a look at
today, the numbers came out that the economy is growing.
The economy is growing, right? So now when we take a look at what's happening, protectionism, how do we remain the strength in the nation, in the world, right? Who's gonna give us that strength? Is it going to be the Republican candidates or the Democratic candidate? Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, was here yesterday speaking the second time. He's done this since the Obama administration. He's been invited to Congress to talk. This is very significant because when you take a look at that issue in the Middle East, some look at it as fighting terrorism. Some look at it as pushing against genocide. So depending on what side you're on and how you look at it, and really it's a mixture of both, we are now, that's a powder keg. All you need is a light, and that thing goes off. So, and then let's not forget about Ukraine, what's happening with Russia and the push. And just now, on today, the United States intercepted some Russian planes off the coast of Alaska. Right. So when you take a look at what's happening now, and then don't forget about the Red Dragon, China, ready to pounce. United States, we are right now in the middle of trying to keep our number one footing in the world, but at the same time, we're funding these other conflicts, both in Eastern Europe, hoping that it can get to Western Europe, and also in the Middle East. We don't have boots on the grounds in those areas, but we're funding with money. But our naval ships are in that area, the Strait of Hormuz, that are basically firing and deflecting a lot of attacks that could land in our areas that we are protecting. So, I believe if there's an international conflict, that changes the dynamics of the race, pushes in their favor of the Republicans. But you're going to continue to see a push with immigration and a lot of miseducation and misinformation about, the dangers of immigrants coming across the border, illegal immigrants, that is, with not a lot of solutions about a good immigration process and program for the United States. And you're going to see a lot of, on the same side, about reproductive health and the right for abortion and the like on the side of the Democrats.
So once President Biden endorsed Kamala Harris, that evening, Sunday evening, Win with Black Women held a webinar. Or they started with the Zoom call. Right. 44,000 Black women got online and allies, and they raised well over $1 million in like 3 hours. Yeah. Then the next night, Roland Martin did the same for Black men. And they, again, raised $1.5 million. And there were millions, I mean, not millions, but thousands of Black men who got online. What is it about Kamala Harris that has created this excitement?
Well, first of all, it's someone that has similar experience as a lot of African Americans, right? So where Barack Obama has similar experiences, she has more of a connection. She's a graduate of Howard University, right? She identifies, with the African American experience, just like Barack Obama did. But even more so, she went to our schools. She pledged our Divine Nines. Shout out to the AKAs. A lot of all my nieces are AKAs. And so, with that, there's that connection, right? It's like you understand this. By the way, so ironically, my wife has a cousin whose name is Kamala. Spells her name with an H, so sometimes I have to switch my brain. It's like, oh no, Kamala. And,
Kamala.
Right. And both my wife's cousin and also the nominee, also both went to Howard, of course. And of course, my son goes to Howard, our oldest son, who is the drum major for Howard as well. So I say she's got to win this election, because if so, my son's going to lead the parade.
There you go. Well, but here's the thing. Because that name, her name, has turned into what I call a dog whistle for the former President Trump, who refuses to pronounce her name correctly. Yeah. And that's just one of the microaggressions that we are going to experience now that this has been happening. But before we get into all of that, I really want to talk about the fact that in Virginia, they were saying that vote.gov, I believe it is, said that this week, or since Sunday, they have had 4,500 people register to vote, where a week ago, it was like in the 3,000s. Yeah. So, I mean, people are galvanized and they are excited.
Right. And then not only that, but there's also new energy, right? Again, the policies of the Biden administration were good. There was nothing wrong with him. He got us out of COVID, and his legacy will also be. I just want to give this quick note. Joe Biden's legacy. Before this, it was Anita Hill, right, and how he led that particular committee, right? The harshness. Some people.
That's right. He apologized. Yeah.
But his legacy will be in a battle phase because without Joe Biden, there is, and in part, there may not be a Barack Obama. He was the vice president for the first black president. Without Joe Biden, there will not be a Vice President Harris. He was the reason for the first black female and black vice president of the United States of America. And without a Joe Biden, there is not a nominee, presumptive nominee and soon to be nominee, black female for president of the United States. And it more than likely, if things continue to go in the way that the Democrats are pushing it, very possibly the first black female and first president of the United States. So Joe Biden's legacy as relates to African American, and keep in mind, it was South Carolina, Representative Claville.
That's right.
That put him over the top in 2020 to win the election that he won. So the connection between Joe Biden and black history is cemented for forever.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the 2024 presidential race with political analyst Dr. Eric Claville, and today is his birthday, so you can wish him a happy birthday.
Thank God for 49 years and counting.
And 49 years and counting. That is outstanding. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What do you think about all of the events that have been happening over the past month and a half, really? Almost 2 months now. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just so much going on. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Let's talk about process so that people understand. The Democratic Convention is coming up in a couple weeks in August
in Chicago.
And in Chicago. So, but the nominee will be selected by the 7th of August.
Right.
So tell me about kind of the switch, because it was Joe Biden and then he had delegates and he had money and so forth. And now it's Kamala Harris. Talk about that process.
Right. So when we talk about, first of all, it's ironic that it's happening in Chicago, because remember Chicago in 1968. I kind of had a feeling we were headed that way again, where you had a contestant convention and a lot of unrest that took place. I don't think we're not going to get that this time. It's going to be a totally different atmosphere. But
so you don't think it'll be a surprise somebody will pop up?
No,
and say,
no,
okay.
Absolutely not. Okay. Right now they were, first of all, the way it works is that, of course, you have primaries, and of course we have primaries here in Virginia and all other states where the nominee is voted up on. Well, you have candidates that are voting up on to become the nominee for that particular party, and the delegates for that state are pledged then for that candidate. So those are the rules. Okay. Every state Democratic Party have those rules coming, and then you have the national DNC or the national party. So with that, you then go to the convention, and of course you see, as our governor did for the Republican Party, stand and say the Commonwealth of Virginia pledges to support, its delegates for XYZ. So that's normally the process that happens. Now, since he's bowed out, those delegates are free. Now, some were pledged and some were bound, and then others vote the way they want to vote. You have what's called super delegates. But now those votes are freed up. So calls are being made for the support to endorse those delegates that were pledged for now Harris, right? Okay. So now those calls have been made. They've been shored up for the most part. And today it was announced that she had enough delegates pledged in principle to become the nominee of the party.
And they're going to do an electronic vote?
Electronic vote. And then, of course, you get to the convention, and, of course, you have the pomp and circumstance that we have. Joe Manchin, there were several individuals that said they would not run for not just for the ticket, but also for vice president. So Joe Manchin, when Biden dropped out, he was like, oh, I'm thinking about it. Then he was like, no, I'm good. So he's not going to run. He's out. You have others that thought about it, but then, of course, within those ranks, conversations have been had, and it's like, okay, let's look at the VP list. Governor Whitmer and Governor Westmore both said that they are not putting their hats into the race for VP, and also Joe Manchin.
Well, and okay, this is America. I mean, seriously, 2 women or 2 African Americans.
Right. So right now, when you take a look at, let's talk about political strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the political chessboard. When you take a look at, first of all, this is going to be a very close election. Before Biden dropped out, I had Trump winning the election and beating Biden, especially in the battleground states in which he trailed terribly. Wow. Right? Mm-hmm. Of those 7 battleground states, he trailed out of 5. All right. So now this is what I call a reset. It's a reset. And I want you guys to pick up the New Journal and Guide, the second oldest black newspaper. Yes. Brent Andrews runs it, and Leonard Colvin does phenomenal work. He's listening as well. But I'll have an article in there. It's called Reset 2024, coming up next week. But in that, now with this reset, the race is really statistical even. Right now, the last poll that came out, CBS YouGov poll on yesterday, showed, well, it was for the 16th through the 18th. It showed where Trump was up 3 percentage points. The margin of error was 2.5 overall. Right now, with the energy that we have, I have that race statistically even. However, this race is going to boil down to the 7 battleground states. 7 battleground states. It's going to be Arizona and Nevada on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. In the Midwest, it's Wisconsin. It's Michigan, it's Pennsylvania. Ohio is always going to be a player in there, even though I think it will go Republican. And then you also have Georgia and North Carolina. The Democrats have to win 4 of those states. They got to win Pennsylvania. They got to win Michigan. They got to win Wisconsin. And they got to win. They got to win Nevada again in order to have a chance to win this election. Now, what's going to end up happening is that African Americans have to overperform again.
So do we have to have African Americans, when I say we, do African Americans have to have the same turnout that they provided when Obama in 2008 when Obama was running? Remember the long lines at 5 o'clock in the morning, people were wrapped around the buildings. I mean, do we need that kind of energy again?
Yeah, and the answer is yes. And the reason why I say African American voters, here's the reason why I say this, is because in those states, that's where your pockets of dedicated Democratic voters are, that you really had to push, because there's only so many white voters, so many Democratic white voters in those states. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of those states are old union states, right, because of manufacturing, but manufacturing has been declining over the years. Mm-hmm. So we all know that. So it's really incumbent upon the Democratic Party to really push that new agenda and attract African American voters. Some may say, oh, you're coming again at the last minute. But I believe that one of the advantages that they have now is that this is a new candidate. So it's a new message, not carrying. I think the message should be finishing some of the policies, finishing the job of the Biden administration, but also forging the new. And the new that they're now combating is that Project 2025. I know that's another show.
Yeah, that's another show. And because we really want to delve deeply into exactly what 2025 is. But it is an issue that she has already started talking about during her speeches and so forth. What about the abortion issue? Is that enough of an issue to pull beyond African American women in particular, but women period over to her side?
I would say it's a mixed bag. It depends on the demographic that you're looking at. If you're looking at traditional women of marriage, heterosexual relationships, men follow head of the household, women work, but maybe are homemakers. The answer is no. That's matter of fact, it's going to push them off. And also the religious side of it, where you're more religiously conservative than not. So you're not going to have that's not going to pull. When you're talking about young, college-educated, liberal women, even liberal-educated women, the answer is yes. That's going to play very, very much so, because the right to choose if you want to have a child or not is something that, since the feminist movement, that's ingrained. And overturning a Roe versus Wade was a major issue. People forgot about how it happened. So you're really in states now, and not a lot of those procedures are the invasive surgical procedures. It's more less taken care of with medication and so forth. So protecting that, I think that's going to be a really big hit and push for that demographic.
And the other thing too, also, is that it has encroached on things like IVF,
Yes.
in vitro fertilization, and other things that, particularly suburban women, young, growing up with families and so forth. So they're using alternative ways
Right.
to become pregnant, and if that is affected, then that becomes more of an issue for them
Absolutely.
too. Let's go to the phones for a minute. Let's talk to Derek, who is on I-95. Hi, Derek. Please be safe while you're driving.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Yes, I will be safe. Thank you.
What's your question?
Yeah. Well, it was more of a comment. I just,
Okay.
I had more of a, I just noticed that on the Democrat side, we don't really talk about immigration too much and the impacts of immigration. I mean, why does Trump have such a strong following on blue-collar America? And the answer is immigration. Immigration directly impacts the bottom line of blue-collar America. Immigrants take blue-collar jobs. They reduce the income that you're going to have because they take jobs for lower rates, number one. And then you have the supply versus demand. When you have 30 million immigrants coming into the country looking for jobs, they're not going to take white-collar jobs. They're taking blue-collar jobs. And with that becomes a huge impact on that blue-collar family income level. Loss of jobs, manufacturing jobs, white, or should I say upper-class Democrats who are white-collar, like Clinton, Obama, and Mrs. Clinton, they're all lawyers, right? So they're not really in tune with blue-collar America. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't, have college degrees and like to work with their hands. And so there's millions of white and black people in America that are blue-collar that are going to be following Trump because he's more concerned about this and resonates on that issue, while Kamala Harris has an open border policy that affects that directly and supports Trump.
Okay.
So if Democrats want to get ahead of this ball, they need to readdress the immigration issue.
Okay, Derek, thank you so much. And just for clarification, it is pronounced Kamala. Kamala Harris is her name. But thank you so much for your call. Eric, you want to respond? I want to bring up one other point, too, that he makes, because another former lieutenant governor out of New York was also making a point of saying that another reason why white people in particular would not vote for Kamala Harris is because of her belief in equity, and they feel that equity means taking away jobs from white people, and that's not what it means, is it?
Yeah. So let me first of all, caller, thank you so much for your comment. When we talk about immigration, everybody agrees, especially industry, business, we need an immigration policy that's equitable across the board to allow individuals to come into the country for specific jobs that we need. We do this in the tech industry. We do this in the medical industry, pharmaceuticals, and so forth. It can be done for the blue collar jobs. In addition to pushing wages down, there are a lot of jobs that immigrants are doing that Americans don't really want to do. A lot of the farming jobs and a lot of the lower paid labor jobs. And you're going to see that happen in industrialized nations. It happens. So you see that happening across the board. However, to his point, immigration also in what we call sanctuary cities is a sore piece, a sore thumb, especially as it relates to where these individuals are placed in sanctuary cities. They're usually placed in African American communities or minority communities. So you have a lot of debate and a lot of trepidation in those communities and heated debates. You see a lot of it in Chicago that took place. So yeah, immigration, you need a policy across the board. But again, nobody's going to talk about something that there may be a liability to them. But to his point, you do see where industry themselves also play a part in allowing these individuals to actually work these jobs without having proper documentation. So, but you are seeing a large following from the Obama, large following toward the Trump administration because of this, and then now the Trump candidacy of what he did during his administration now as a candidate as far as this goes. And you also mentioned the equity piece.
The equity piece. Mm-hmm.
So again, misinformation. This is why teaching history is so important. This is why teaching African American history is so important. This is why teaching the history of immigrants is so important. And we can't forget about the Native Americans. Now, part of that is that a lot of the policies and actions toward African Americans, Native Americans, and other Black people in this country perpetuated at the hands of white Americans with those policies are terrible. They're horrific, right? I mean, but those policies, that's what happened, and they created what we have now. So it's important to understand what took place so we can understand why we're here now at this point in order to get to a point where we can continue to grow stronger together. So when we talk, again, you talk about dog whistles, equity, and inclusion. These are all dog whistles for the old affirmative action tropes,
yes,
the old welfare mother tropes, back during the Reagan administration. So you're constantly going to get these dog whistles. And when you and I were talking earlier about the race issue of now presumptive nominee Harris, is that I don't think it's the race issue is going to be the big issue. I think it's going to be the gender issue.
Wow. And it'll be on women's side as well as the male side. Absolutely.
Matter of fact, more so, I believe, on women's side than a lot of men's side.
So, it's funny because the Republican side, and I found it very interesting that Speaker of the House Johnson has actually come out and said, stop talking about race, talk about the issues moving forward. Because, this trope of she's a DEI hire. A dear friend of mine sent me a note last night and said DEI stands for definitely earned it. As opposed to what they're trying to use it for. But speaking of language and so forth, I want to play a clip, and I know it's a little long, but I think it's important in terms of language and why language is going to be so important in this race. Let's listen.
Just say, I don't think the campaign has to go anywhere near any of that, right? This is in a lot of ways the same campaign it was last week. It comes down to the three I's: immigration, inflation, and competence. You have Kamala Harris, who's the deciding vote for the Inflation Reduction Act that actually spent trillions of dollars causing inflation. She was Biden's border czar. We've had a record number of border crossings. And in competence, she stood side by side with Joe Biden on every single foreign policy disaster we've had, including the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. She owns that record. That's all Donald Trump has to talk about. The rest will take care of itself.
She's not incompetent. Okay, you don't become the Attorney General of California.
Or a U.S. Senator.
Or the Vice President of the United States. By calling her incompetent, you're calling the 81 million people who voted for her incompetent as well. But let me just say this. That is what we're talking about. There is a way to attack her record on policy without calling her a name. Incompetent is an unflattering name. And when people do that to Black women, that is what Van is talking about. You might not agree, but as a Black woman, let me tell you how we hear it.
Well, you know who disagrees are the voters. The voters right now believe the Biden-Harris administration is one of the most incompetent administrations in American history. That's not me. That's the voters right now. And they're not just saying about the vice president. They're saying about everyone in the administration right now.
Let me get Van to respond to that. Go ahead, Van.
Well, I agree with Ashley. Look, we're going to have to learn how to talk to each other. There's certain things that there's a smart way and a dumb way to do anything. It's a very dumb way to, after 400 years of this mistreatment of Black people and Black women, to say you're incompetent. Maybe that makes sense to you in your world and you wouldn't take it that personally, but that has been the slur. That has been the core, that we are not worthy. We're not as smart. We're not as good. We can't do stuff. And so when you have someone who's overcome all of that again and again and again and again, and that's the word you pick, incompetent, I'm just going to tell you, it's not going to work as well for you as you think it. And what you're going to wind up doing is getting a lot of people who are not going to vote, who really did not care, who were sick of all of it. People are going to crawl through broken glass to vote against a party who says that about a Black woman. Pick another word. Don't pick that one.
Pick another word.
Yeah, I think I don't agree with Van Jones a lot, but I agree with him on that. There again, the party behind closed doors said, "Listen, cannot bring up this race issue. We can't bring up the woman issue. Don't do it. We got to stick with policy issues and how we perceive ourselves because it's the world is changing. The world is changing, so we have to make sure that they're changing with the world, but keeping a message that's consistent with what they want to win with. So, like I said, I definitely agree with Van Jones because, again, those are all dog whistles. To say that you're incompetent means that, hey, you didn't earn your education, you didn't earn this, and so forth. And again, you only need just a person to provide misinformation in order to create fear. Because fear is never created with truth.
And I think that's the biggest issue is the fear factor.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because as I look at my social media and just kind of scrolling through and so forth, and I'm seeing people that, are saying, I think we're in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, these are black people who are saying, I think we're in trouble. I think because they recognize the depth of racism in this country. And the fear for that person, just like people were terrified that Barack Obama was going to be assassinated. I mean, it was a very real fear, and it looks like that way. But we have another call from little brother in Shreveport, Louisiana. Hello there, you're on the air.
Good morning or good afternoon. This is Barbara Hamley, thank you so much for taking my call. This is Wilford Claville III from Shreveport, Louisiana.
Dr. Wilford. Dr. Wilford.
It's so nice to talk to you.
Thank you so very much. Happy birthday, my brother.
Thank you, my day one. I appreciate you.
Now, is this an older brother or younger brother?
Younger by 15 months.
Younger by 15 months. Oh, okay. He holds that over your head too, doesn't he?
No, look. We don't worry. We're very, very close. Very close.
We are.
Well, that's wonderful. And I appreciate you listening all the way from Louisiana. I understand we got a fan club in Louisiana, so that is just awesome. What do you think about our conversation? What do you think about all the changes that have been happening?
Oh, look, it is it's dramatic, and dynamic as well. And I did not think that it was going to happen this fast, but it really did. And so I heard Mr. Derrick talking about the immigration issue as well, and that's really one of those issues that the Trump administration or Donald Trump uses as a fear-mongering factor as well. And so you really have to make sure that you have both sides, just like this border deal that has been I guess they were working on for probably about a year and a half now. They were bipartisan, but they did not vote on it as well. And so the key was the Biden administration started talking to Mexico, I think Guatemala, and some of the Central American countries as well to kind of stop that flow. And so with that being said, now what's taking place is that the immigration is now less than it has been in decades. Actually, the migration across the border. Mm-hmm. But my I guess my question is well, I wanted my dear brother to speak about the impact of J.D. Vance or the lack thereof, and who he feels, and he may have talked about this before I got on, but who he feels like the best vice presidential candidate for Kamala Harris would actually be. I personally think it's Josh Shapiro, but with that being said, you can go ahead and chime in. But love you so much, my brother, and thank you, Ms. Lee, for taking my call.
No problem. Thank you so much for calling in. So who should she pick?
Yeah. So we did talk about the J.D. Vance. I think he becomes a liability, but I believe that the vice president pick has to be, and I've said this on air on one of the television stations, it has to be representative of a demographic that the Democratic Party is losing ground on. It has to be a white male. It has to be a moderate white male. So you got to replace Joe Biden. And I believe that Roy Cooper gives the best opportunity to replace that Joe Biden.
Governor of North Carolina.
North Carolina, Republican state, two-time Democratic governor, reelected for a reason. I believe 67 years old, I believe he gives that because in any party, any organization, any structure, you got to see representation. And I believe that I think white males see Roy Cooper as representation of them, of their time period, and of their experiences, their values, and so forth. I think that'll be a phenomenal pick for her. It also puts North Carolina into play as well. In addition to that, I think when you look at two more, you look at Mark Kelly, who is the Senator Mark Kelly, Arizona, Gabby Giffords' husband. You put those two together because she brings now the representation of what gun violence and misinformation can bring. You bring that dynamic in, and you bring her from the House into the White House, if they win. And I think that's a great story within itself. And I think right in the middle, I think Shapiro would be a good pick, but I just think that having Harris and Shapiro together would probably be a little bit too much, again, overkill when you talk about representation and Xing out a demographic that don't see themselves. So yeah. Now I'm hearing Andy Beshear. I think Andy Beshear doesn't bring anything. I think he's a moderate. He's in Kentucky. Kentucky's going to go red, but I think he's the equivalent of a Tim Kaine on a Hillary Clinton ticket. Safe, really doesn't turn the needle one way or the other, but definitely a solid policymaker, solid person to have on the ticket, but doesn't move the needle. You got to be strategic. You got to be strategic in this situation. And Cooper gives you that best opportunity to be strategic. I think Kelly's second, and then Shapiro.
That's right. Okay, so here's the $1 million question. Is America ready for a Black Asian female president?
Well, it's interesting because when you mentioned the Asian part, of course, she's Indian,
Yes.
And, there's this, of course, India has their caste system. So are you European or are you Asian? Which one is it? But for all intents and purposes, she's Black. She's a Black woman in America and identifies as that. The answer is yes. Yes, we are. And America is ready for things that we don't know we are ready for until we actually experience it. Was America ready for rock and roll? Not really, but yeah, when it came, it blew up. Was America ready for hip hop? No, but when it came, it blew up, and it's still here. Was America ready for a Black president? No, but when it came, it now it's the best thing since sliced bread. We're happy about it. Is America ready for a Black woman? First of all, a woman president and a Black woman at that. The answer is yes, it is. I will say though, the only example we've had of this and of a strong leader woman was Margaret Thatcher. You remember the former prime minister of England, of Great Britain during that time period. But Margaret Thatcher, when you take a look at her history, did not favor women in her administration because she thought of the perception of strength versus weak. So, how a potential President Harris rules and picks the cabinet and so forth will also be representative of an era, change of an era as well.
We have not heard from Michelle and Barack Obama in terms of endorsement. Why not? And we got like a minute and a half or a minute.
60 seconds.
Yeah.
I believe they're waiting. I think that's, again, just another moment for them to come out with a great speech. I know the minority leader the leader of the Senate, Schumer, and the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, made their statement. They're not really exciting. They're great policymakers. But when the Obamas come out, that's going to be a major piece. And I believe the three biggest speeches outside of Harris's acceptance speech is going to be Joe Biden, Michelle Obama, and Barack Obama. I think those are going to be the most important speeches of the night.
Outside of Harris's.
Absolutely.
Well, we know that you will take us on through. We appreciate it, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back over the summer and over the next couple of months as this thing continues.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for being with us today. Before we go, I want to invite you. I have the honor of serving as the MC and the moderator of a panel for the official launch of the Premier Wealth Building Program for Women. It's called RR Fund Wealth Accelerator Program. It is Thursday, August the 1st at 6 p.m. It's going to be held at Mustard Seed Place in Portsmouth. Now, you can register. It is free to come, but you must register. So go to mustardseedplace.com and look under the events page. I hope you will come out and join me, and we will have a great time talking about how to build wealth. The stakes are high, and no matter your choice, the best thing you can do for yourself, the community, the Commonwealth, and our nation is to vote. If you're not registered, get registered. Please take care of that. Next week on Another View, up close and personal with the new head of Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing, Mr. Nathan Sims. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Have a fantastic weekend, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.